Now it's our turn to, sorry for the words, but put our balls on the table.
Remember, kids, this is not how you play hockey. It's just ugly.
I like it.
Screw you guys. I'm doing this.
You know what? I love ice cream too.
Go back to Canada, Guy Lafleur.
Game on!
Yeah, game on.
Hello and welcome into another episode of The Hockey Show right here on Mile High Sports with JJ Jerez, that's me, and Ryan Bolding.
That's me!
Hey, we're back. We had a week off. Last week we were at Ball Arena watching the Avalanche play the Pittsburgh Penguins, and what a game that was, right? That must have been the only game I could think of that was better this season was the game against the Florida Panthers that we also saw at Ball Arena, but that was a real treat of a game, just two good teams going at it and trying to expose each other's weaknesses, and the Avalanche were able to come on top, and the Pittsburgh Penguins actually haven't won a game since.
Crushed them. I was amazed by how many people were excited to watch Sidney Crosby live, and it doesn't matter at what stage in his career. Like, I mean, there was a period of time where he was like always being rested for playoffs. They always play the Penguins this late in the season in Denver, and Sidney was always being rested for the playoffs, so you never got to see him. So here we were, and everybody was jazzed, and it's amazing to watch him play live.
My best memory of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and yeah, it's always a treat, right? And that's something I always try to remember when opposing teams are coming in. Who are the stars? How old are they? How many more times do I think I'll actually be able to see this guy and spend a little extra time? Like Jumbo Joe, right? Last time he was in the building, I spent a little extra time keeping an eye on him and just watching the treat that is Jumbo Joe. But my best memory of the Pittsburgh Penguins comes the year after they won the Stanley Cup. I don't remember off the top of my head what year that was. But you remember pre-COVID, Ryan?
I don't. I'm sorry.
When we were at Avalanche games, that final commercial at the 5-minute point of the third period hits, and then all the media runs downstairs and watches the rest of the game in the atrium, right?
In the VOM before we go into the locker room.
Right. So there
What
I
does
was.
the locker room even look like anymore?
Yeah, who knows? I saw videos of it. It's different colors now. I think different lighting. They probably just remodeled the heck out of it now that they knew we weren't going to be in there, right? But I'm standing there in the VOM waiting for the game to end. I'm pretty sure the Penguins were crushing the Avalanche at that point. And come next to me is a young woman that I'd never seen. So I start talking to her. Hey, who are you? What are you doing? She's like, oh, I just delivered a bunch of pizza for the Pittsburgh Penguins. They didn't leave me a tip. And I was like, what? They just ordered 300 pizzas and didn't leave you a tip? That's ridiculous. So that will always forever stand out to me as my most, I guess, apparent Pittsburgh Penguins memory.
Did you go in the locker room and ask him?
No, I had to go in
Like,
the
hey,
locker.
Gino, you had no points, but also the team didn't leave a tip. What do you think about that?
Yeah, hey, I know you guys
Thoughts?
made a lot of extra money on that Stanley Cup playoff run from last year, but you can't tip the poor pizza lady right here in Denver. But
How dare you?
it is what it is. But that brings us to our matinee money today. 2 matinee games going on. New Jersey and Dallas. You know, Dallas fighting for that final playoff spot in the West. So I think they'll definitely overcome the New Jersey Devils here. New Jersey also announcing 2 injuries that they're going to be missing a couple players. So I think Dallas, just considering the circumstances, is going to win that one. So I'm taking Dallas money line parlayed with Washington and Pittsburgh. Such a great game every single year. But as we just mentioned, Pittsburgh haven't won in over a week, right? They lost to the Avalanche twice, lost to the Rangers just the other day. I feel like they're a little bit deflated, but they're also on a playoff push. They're fighting, I guess, not really fighting, but it might be 2 or 3 where they land up versus the Rangers, right? So I'm going with Washington plus 1.5. I can't confidently say that Pittsburgh's going to lose, but I think it's going to be a close game if they do lose. So I'm parlaying the Dallas Stars with Washington plus 1.5 today at a plus 112.
I've been agonizing over that game all morning for fantasy hockey purposes because I don't know if I should play Malkin and Gensel against Washington when I have, and I dread saying this out loud because my fantasy season is going to come down to Matt Duchene, who is never a fantasy guy, right? But this year he's been out of control.
Yep.
So, but I just couldn't reasonably pick either team in that one. So what I did is I did a 5-team parlay, money line all across the board. Stars over Devils, Panthers over Predators, Flames over Kraken, Rangers over Senators, and the Leafs over the Canadiens at plus 510.
We'll never forget that Matt Duchene moment, right, when he scored 30 goals and Patrick Wall rips him in the following press conference. Well, now he's sitting at 37, might get to 40. So that could be a big
I
year
was
for
there.
him.
I really didn't agree with that at the time. I felt like, I understood the team first, but in as bad of a season as that was, like you couldn't let a guy have a little joy. Like maybe if some of the guys had a little more fun, they might have performed a little better. You know what I mean?
I think it just rubbed Coach Patty Waugh the wrong way because it was a loss, right? I think had it been a win, he would have no problem with that kind of celebration, but I'm pretty sure they were down like 4-1 or something at that point.
Yeah, I don't remember the final score.
Either do I. I kind of just made that
I don't
up.
remember the whole season.
So as we sit here, the end of the season is approaching. We kind of look at the standings, and in the East, the playoffs are pretty much set. There's very, very little chance the Islanders catch the Washington Capitals there. So Washington Capitals look like they're going to lock in that 8th place here soon. But we still have about 10, 12 games left, depending on which team you look at around the league. So my question to you, Ryan, is looking at the last 2 seasons, which were both shortened, and now our first 82-game season back, do you think 82 games is maybe too long for a regular season nowadays?
It does feel like a lot.
It's dragging on here this last month.
I liked the idea of like 50, 60 in there somewhere. You know?
56 last year, right?
Yeah. I don't know about 82, and I know it all comes down to advertising and stuff, that kind of thing. But like fans in Denver can barely watch the Avalanche anyway. So I mean, the advertising on altitude situation, I'd throw that out the window. I just think, I don't know, though, because the NFL even went to 17 games. So I don't think you're going to see a reduction in games. There's too much money to be made. Cha-ching.
With his own sound effects here. Nice work, Ryan. Yeah, the almighty dollar. Just always controlling things,
Follow
right?
the money. It drives everything.
I'm with you, though. It stinks to say, but 82 games is never going to be something we get away from, I don't think. If anything, it might get more. It'd be nice to maybe shrink that by a small margin and extend the playoffs a bit, but then, again, you start watering down the playoffs, kind of like the NBA is doing, and I'm not really for that either. So it was our first 82-game season in a while, and it feels longer than we're used to, but that's just that, right? We're just not used to it. I think maybe next year, the year after, we'll be back to being comfortable with these 82-game season. And, of course, the Avalanche running away with the first place in the West. I mean, it kind of adds to the monotony of this last final weeks.
Yeah, it's been tough because with the exception of a game here or there, I mean, you could say the Winnipeg Jets game last night was a challenge for the team, but it doesn't feel like a lot of games have been challenging. And I talked about this last time with the Avalanche. If you go all season without facing any adversity, what happens when you finally face them? And I know the Avs have had injuries and this and that, dumb penalties by Mikko Rantanen in the last 30 seconds of the game kind of situations. But I'm talking like, down in a series adversity, like down in a series and losing Nathan McKinnon to a dumb broken hand in a fight or something like that, right? How do you handle that? And so you're concerned that the Avalanche haven't had a whole lot to play for in a while.
I think that what's unique about the Avalanche right now, though, is those trade line additions, right? 4 is a lot of players to get used to in a lineup that's kind of already buzzing. So I almost feel like since the trade deadline, Jared Bednar's kind of approached this more like a preseason, right? We're not rushing the guys who are hurt. We're letting them stay until they get 100% healthy, and we're seeing what we can do with Arturi Lehkonen, Nico Sturm, Andrew Cogliano, and Josh Manson, and seeing how they fit and where they're best fit.
I mean, they're 13 points ahead of the next closest team in the Western Conference. So, you're playing with house money.
Mm-hmm.
You can mix the lines up if you need to. You could put Nathan McKinnon on the PK, and you could put, Jack Johnson on the power play down in the slot if you want to. And it doesn't matter, right? But it is important to find out who is gelling well and how you can change your lineup to adjust to what another team is doing against you. And I would expect to see a little bit more of that. Jared Bednar, said he was doing it last month in March quite a bit, juggling the lines. There was speculation that it had to do with Landeskog's looming absence from the lineup. But you want to see how these teams can handle the changes, how they can handle the line changes, how they can handle not having last change on the road, things like that. I think, they kind of got out-coached in that sense against Vegas in the playoffs last year. So from here on out, I want to see what the Avs can do in, let's say, a regular situation.
Yeah, I think with maybe 4 or 5 games left, you want to get back to everything that you're going to be using in the playoffs, right? Enough experimenting, enough juggling of lines, start getting used to playoff-style hockey and playoff level, because you don't want to spend the first 1 or 2 games of the playoffs reacclimating to high-intensity hockey.
Well, it helps that these games at the end of the season aren't all throwaway games. Like, sometimes it seemed almost ironic that in the years when the Avalanche weren't making the playoffs, you had a lot of like non-playoff games at the end of the season, or the year where all the Wild and the Avalanche had to win one game in order to make the playoffs, and the Avs lost out. Like, they lost their last 5 games, and the Wild lost their last 5 games, but they had one more point. Like, that was an end of season that mattered, but you hate to see, like, I know the Avs have New Jersey coming up, and LA, but LA is making a push, right? But the end of the season features games against Carolina, Washington, Edmonton, Winnipeg, St. Louis, Nashville, Minnesota. You throw the Kraken in there, which is, a gimme game. But, I mean, that's potentially playoff hockey in all of those, because for every other team, it matters. So you like to see that at the end of the season here, where they really have to ramp up and start playing playoff hockey pretty much now.
Yeah, let's look at the bottom of that playoff in the West right before we get out of here. LA hanging on for dear life in that 3rd spot. They've now been jumped by the Edmonton Oilers, who have just been playing some really good hockey lately, right? They haven't lost a game since that beatdown in the Battle of Alberta to Calgary, right? It was like a 9-6 game or something like that. They've been on fire since that day. Way to kind of respond and bounce back, and they've been climbing. Now Vegas looks like they're out of it. LA, like I said, hanging on for dear life. Vegas is the only one behind them. And then, of course, Dallas made a good late-season surge to kind of take over that last playoff spot. So I think it's been fun watching the bottom of the playoff standings in the Western Conference here.
Yeah, Vegas is a team to watch. They're playing better than Dallas. They've got a plus 13 goal differential. So, they're starting to figure things out again, and that makes them dangerous. Like, even just psychologically, a series against Vegas for the Avalanche is precarious. But also, Dallas is a real conundrum, right? You got Ottinger, who could play very well. You're never sure where Dallas is going to end up, and that makes things a little squirrely. And then Nashville's holding on into there. And like you said, LA, I mean, Nashville's got a plus 30 goal differential, and they're in the first wild card. So it's like, this is a team I also don't think the Avs necessarily would like to face if they didn't have to.
Both Nashville and Dallas are 2 teams that have beat the Colorado Avalanche twice this year. Might be the only ones. I don't know. You'll have to fact check me, but
maybe it won't be a waste of 8 days, like Daryl Sutter said.
Absolutely. So I think those are 2 teams that know how to beat Colorado. We're in for an interesting playoffs. Can't wait. I'm excited. This last couple weeks are dragging on. Bring me playoff hockey and bring it to me soon. We got more to get into from around the league next. A lot of headlines happened this week. We'll get to our opinions in on them. Then we're talking to Mike Chambers about the national championship tonight, NCAA DU versus Minnesota State, 6 o'clock tonight. And, of course, the Avs play tonight, too, so we still got more Avs to talk about. And, again,
I'm sorry, this week belongs to my Pioneers.
Hey, I'm
don't even care about the Avs game tonight.
Exactly. I just said for 15 minutes how the end of the season is monotonous and boring. So, yeah, I'm all in on DU tonight. But we'll be right back to get to some headlines, so stick with us here on the Hockey Show, Mile High Sports. JJ Jerez, Danny Bailey, Ryan Bolding, you went last. We'll be right back.
16 minutes past the big hour. Is that not right, Mr. Scream? Great, good stuff. I think people are getting really cranked.
Welcome back. The Hockey Show.
That's us.
Biggest and best live hockey radio show in all the land, all of Colorado anyway.
All the land.
This side of the Platte River, maybe? This side of the Mississippi?
Yeah, let's go with that.
All right.
Like, I don't know how far the Platte River goes.
I don't either. I have no idea. I'll have to look into it.
It's not something I was taught in school. They removed it from my textbooks.
I recently learned a lot about the Highline Canal. You know much about that?
The Highline Canal Trail, I know.
You're right. The Highline Canal has a lot of history in Denver. And, of course, in my job as a realtor showing homes, I've been showing a lot of homes around the Highline Canal lately. So I'm like, I need to learn more about what the Highline Canal actually is about, learn the history of it, just so I could sound that much more sophisticated when I'm showing houses around it, right?
Yeah, give us the cliff notes here.
Well, I mean, it was a canal that was invented by the city of Denver to help irrigation with the farmlands around Denver, and it starts at a high point and it slowly goes lower and lower and lower to kind of provide some natural flow, and it really runs all over the place, surrounding the Cherry Creek and Aurora areas, and even goes all the way out to Rocky Mountain Arsenal, where the Rapids play, right? And a long time ago, when they were shutting down Rocky Mountain Arsenal, they're actually one of the last people to still use the Highline Canal's water flow. And a big reason for that is because they dumped a lot of their weapons just in the ground.
Uranium,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's why Commerce City has to use water from elsewhere. They can't use their own water because it's so contaminated. Which brings me to my next point. There's a website I'll send you later. Look up the water in your city, because there's a lot of water in Denver that's contaminated because of Rocky Mountain Arsenal. So something to keep an eye on, everybody out there. But let's get back to hockey. That's neither here nor there.
Today
Now,
I learned.
talking aliens, talking Denver history, right? What else do we do here at the show?
Who knew you were such an avid reader?
Right. I don't watch movies, so I got to do something else.
Yeah. In between not watching movies, he's reading books.
Yeah, exactly. Well, mainly just Wikipedia, I guess. But let's get to the headlines of the week. I think the biggest conversation, and this happened Saturday night, so it might be a little stale now, but I still want to get to it and get your opinion. That's the Jay Beagle and the Troy Terry situation, right? Troy Terry kind of getting his face pumped, not even fighting back, defenseless, turtled, and Jay Beagle just gave him a black eye and just kept feeding him fists. I guess, what is your thought on the whole situation? Of course, we heard Tyson Nash's asinine comments about how, well, that's what you get for bringing too much skill to the game, right? So, yeah, let me just get your overall opinion on that matter.
Originally, let's start with Tyson Nash. I thought his comments were being a little blown out of proportion, because it seemed more or less like he was just commenting on maybe Jay Beagle's mentality of the situation. But then he kind of doubles down on it a little bit, and then people are like, Nash is exactly the Jay Beagle type of guy who would defend that. A guy with, not a lot of points and goals, a guy with a record of, not necessarily fighting the toughest guys, but fighting some guys. So I think it's just that old man get off my lawn mentality that is, kind of toxic for the sport anymore. This is not Nash's NHL anymore. It's not the NHL that you and I grew up with even anymore. It's a high skill, high talent game that involves dedication throughout the year. And there's just not going to be a place for thuggery like that for very long. And if you want to get headshots and that kind of thing out of the game, it's got to start with this stuff too. Fine, you're mad that Trevor Zegras had an amazing goal earlier in the game. You're mad that you're getting trounced. You're mad that you're having a bad season on a bad team. It's not Troy Terry's fault. He's not the guy who did the pizzazz, the razzle dazzle earlier in the game. I think it's asinine. It's just total BS.
Right. It was ridiculous. I hated every second of it, because you could tell he was just going after anybody who was in front of him, right? He tried to go after one person, then they got separated, and Troy Terry was standing there, and he got the malicious treatment. My only justification for it is exactly what you said, right? Think about the year that the Coyotes have had. I mean, from game one, this team was an absolute joke, and it just has to be frustrating as a player to be going through that, and then you get another lacrosse-style Michigan goal scored on you, which is very embarrassing. I'm not justifying what he's doing, but I'm justifying his thought process, right? He's just frustrated. He's over it. It's been a really tough year, and he just wants to show that he cares. Right? I don't know if he's in a contract year or not, but perhaps he is. Perhaps he's showing the powers that be like, hey, look how much I care. Look how much this bad season affects me, and I'm willing to do everything I can to stick up for my team. I say that in air quotes. And, I just think that's the thought process. So I think just wires crossed. It's a classic hockey.
It's a sending a message thing, right? So that permeates every level of hockey, from the pros to the semi-pros to the youths to the over 30 beer leaguers like us. When you've got guys doing the razzle dazzle and the dangles and the dipsy doodles, and they're going through everybody, even more so, in a level where you can't be physical, and so that kind of play dominates, right? You do one of two things: you go after that person to stop them, or you do something to send a message. And I think that's what Jay Beagle's going for. Like, we're not going to put up with this anymore, but you can't take it to just the absolute ugly extreme that it went. Like, challenge a guy to a fight, and if he wants to fight you, fight him.
Well,
But you don't just mug a guy and maul him while he's down on the ice. Take shots at his face. It's ugly. He was bleeding before any of the other scrums had even hit their midpoint.
I
Jay
think
Beagle is in a contract year.
There you
He's
go.
an unrestricted free agent next year.
that makes a lot of sense, right? Trying to prove to either this team or other teams what he brings to the table, right? And that's also,
if that's all he brings.
I mean, it was kind of a cowardly move because of the lack of, I guess, repellents that the Anaheim Ducks have, right? They got rid of Delorier, sent him to Minnesota. They got rid of Ricard Raquel, and Ryan Getzlaf wasn't in the lineup. Those are
Manson.
three guys that would have defended their teammates, right? And now the Anaheim Ducks don't really have a guy like that, and they're right alone. You see the value of keeping a deterrent.
Yeah, I saw a lot of, pontificating about whether this signals that the end of the enforcer is not as near as everyone thought. I just don't necessarily agree with it, right? Because the more that teams and guys like Zegras and Terry do what they do, and guys like Jay Beagle have to get ugly about it, the less guys like Jay Beagle you're going to see on teams, because that's not the solution to stopping what happened. Arizona got their ass handed to them. It was over. You see ugliness, you see thuggery at the end of games, in particular blowout games, right? Where maybe you feel disrespected, like you could have turned it down a notch. You didn't have to embarrass us. But, I mean, that's not the solution to stopping what's happening. And so you're not going to see guys like Jay Beagle doing that for much longer, because the only way to stop it is better talent.
Yeah, I'm with it.
I definitely grew up in a kind of the concept of get them back on the scoreboard, which doesn't always work, right? Like if you're not Trevor Zegras level, get them back on the scoreboard doesn't work for you. A lot of people would resort to what Jay Beagle does, but there's a line. You just can't cross the line, right? There used to be the fight code. You don't hit a guy when he's down. You don't hit a guy when he's defenseless, right? If you fall on top of a guy, you hold his head so he doesn't hit his head on the ice.
Yep.
This is codeless garbage.
Yeah, I think what's going to come out of this is a stronger rule against fighting players that aren't dropping the gloves, right? Not willing participants. I think we're really going to see a crackdown on that because of this. But other than that, we're going to see more players do similar things down the road. I mean, I guarantee it. That's why the Avalanche re-sign a guy like McDermott. That's why you see the value in a guy like Ryan Reeves, right? So let's get to Ryan Getzlaf, sticking with the Anaheim Ducks train here. He announces his retirement kind of midweek. Not exactly a surprise, something we all saw coming. I just thought it was funny that he did it during season. Usually see these retirement announcements coming during the offseason.
Yeah, I think, putting it out there so fans have the opportunity to say goodbye in their own right, and he can kind of ride off into the sunset. Like he tried to give it a go last year and maybe test the waters at trade deadline and see if he could get onto a contender, and it sounds like it didn't really work out. And you've got Anaheim, they're in the middle, right? They're at a crossroad of, are we doing the full rebuild or are we good enough to compete? And I think you saw it around trade deadline time this year. They're going rebuild mode, or at least, youth infusion mode, where they're selling off guys like Manson and Raquel and stuff like that. And, he probably doesn't have it in him to carry it. You look at a guy like Joe Thornton, Jaromir Jagr, Patrick Marleau, like these guys are kind of anomalies in terms of physical fitness and longevity, and some guys just don't have that. But what a career Getzlaf has had.
Yeah, I think he has some left in the tank, but I think the situation really was Anaheim approaching him and saying, look, we got to move on from you. We want to go youth. If you want to keep playing, you're going to have to do it somewhere else. And he said he didn't want to do that, right? I think that's what happened last trade deadline when the rumors around him started. He kind of said, I don't want to go anywhere. I like Anaheim. I love my life here in Orange County, and my wife and kids love it here. I'm not going anywhere else. So if you guys don't want me, I'm out.
I encourage everybody to go back a couple months and listen to the 32 Thoughts podcast with Ryan Getzlaf as the interview. It's fascinating, right? But he's also been injured a couple times this season. He's been out of the lineup. It's your body just starts to break down. You can't do it anymore. I remember talking to Jan Heda at the end of his career, where he was he was unsure about whether he would retire or not. He gave it one last go, signed a PTO with Chicago, ended up going to, I believe, the Lake Erie Monsters and trying to push through there. But the big thing he said is it's really hard during off season to put your body through all the work you need to do to be ready for training camp. Like, it's easy when you're playing and you're in that shape and you keep it going and you're in the games and your adrenaline's carrying you, but when you don't have anything to play for, the work involved in getting ready is almost one of the hardest things. Then think about when you're hurt frequently and you're like, man, the work I have to do to recover from this and try and prevent it from re-aggravating, that's a lot.
Yeah, I agree, right? And at the beginning of the season, when that Getzlaf interview on 32 Thoughts was done, Anaheim was still in the mix, right? They started the season really well. They were at the top of the standings. They were going to be a playoff team, and then they kind of just blew it down the road. But along with getting your body ready and keeping it going, Keith Yandle was another big story from the past week. His Ironman streak comes to an end because of a healthy scratch. You hate to see it end that way, but at the same time, you kind of understand the thought process from the Philadelphia Flyers. I don't know. I still feel like I'm on the fence of which was the right decision, but I also don't think I care that much to really get off the fence either direction.
I've struggled with this a lot because on the one hand, what does Philly have to play for right now? Nothing. So what does it matter to them if they just boost his Ironman streak at the end of this, right? It's kind of like consider it a veteran favor owed. You know, you've played a long time and you deserve this, right? So that's one side of it. The other side of it, which is what they're doing, and Mike Yeo even said as much, was we've got nothing to play for, but we've got young guys trying to prove that they deserve a roster spot next year. We've got guys we want to take a look at. They deserve an opportunity to get some looks against top talent in the league, right? I don't disagree with that either. So you get to this point where you're like, how much is a veteran owed the respect of being able to play in the lineup until he says he's not capable of playing anymore? And what does that do to the team? What does that do to morale? What does that say to younger players? I think back to when Barry Melrose coached the Tampa Bay Lightning for 16 games and refused to play Steven Stamkos. And that was it. Goodbye. You're out. You're fired. And look at where Steven Stamkos is, right? Like that, the mentality of like you have to earn your dues as a rookie, I don't think works anymore. And so, you know, I have a hard time with saying, let's keep this, you know, aging, decaying body in the lineup despite his capability or lack thereof over what could be beneficial to the next generation of players.
Exactly. I mean, if you look back at his time with Florida, he was ousted in Florida, too. Kind of the same situation. They didn't want to jeopardize his Ironman streak there either. He ended up getting back in the lineup on a day that he was scratched, and then they eventually got rid of him, right?
Yeah,
and
the players stood up for him, which I think was good, but
you can see that this has been an issue with him for over a year, whether or not he should be in a lineup.
That,
so it seems too much of a charity at this point that we're still talking about it and we still are fighting for him because now it doesn't make any sense.
And I'm never going to criticize a team for doing right by a veteran and being classy in that regard, but to what extent? When does it end? That's where I'm at.
Right on. Well, those are the headlines for the week.
One last thing we got to put in.
Go ahead.
Not only did Denver East High School win the state championship over George Gwozdecki and Valor Christian, right? They went on and won the high school national championship for their class, too. It's impressive from a school.
I love that. I do that noise on my own in my daily life all the time. That's the Nuggets guy. But my one thing that I don't like about that is my senior year, my team won the state championship. That team didn't get to go to the national tournament until the following year. So our team that actually won it, that had 8 seniors on it, didn't get to go fight for that national championship. The team that followed us was too young and they were terrible and they blew it in that national. So I wish we would have had something like this. That's the only thing I have to say.
It's always about him.
It's always about me.
Who cares about you?
I do.
Yeah. We know.
Yeah. Well, that'll do it for this portion of the hockey show. We'll be right back to talk to Mike Chambers and get into the DU National Championship going on tonight, 6 o'clock, ESPN 2. I'm excited for it. I know you are. You got your jersey on right now.
University of Denver for me and you.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
I want to sing the whole song. Nobody wants to hear that.
Stick around. We'll be right back. Mike Chambers joined us right here on the Hockey Show.
Let's go, Colorado!
We're back right here on the Hockey Show, Colorado's biggest and best live hockey radio show. JJ Jerez, Ryan Bolding. We're heading to the phones to good friend Mike Chambers of the Denver Post. He's been spending some of the last few weeks covering the DU Pioneers as they make their way to the national championship tonight. Mike, thanks so much for hanging out with us. I guess I want to start with a quick question about last week's men's regional final up in Loveland, right? How was that? How did the turnout locally end up? And I guess your overall assessment of just hosting that event here in Colorado.
Hey, the regional was awesome. They pulled me off the Avs to go up there, and I was glad that they did. I know the landscape up there a little bit with the Colorado Eagles and stuff, and it's just a great barn, and it turned out to be an ideal setting because the Pioneers won the first night and got to play in the final, and the final was amazing. I mean, it was sold out. It's just a really great atmosphere there. It's sold out, and it's a great small barn, and I thought it was a great event. And the NCAA had it.
We're losing you, Mike. We can't hear you, but I want to ask if you can hear me. I mean, if it felt like the West Regional like two home games, and as it should, because they're out here in Loveland. But we know college parents like to travel, college teams like to have, boosters and support groups out there. But it really did feel like a home game. Like the crowd was loud.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear me. I moved to a new place and the service kind of stinks right now, but it definitely felt like a home crowd, home ice advantage for sure. And I just think from the NCAA point of view and DU's point of view, this is why you host a regional, and it really worked out this year.
And they've got a couple more years of hosting, but it's been a long time. Before we get to the other games, Mike, it's been a long time since Colorado Denver has hosted the finals. Like there was, 2005, 2006 when the Frozen Four was here last?
Well, I think you got to check your math there. I think it was 08, because 04 was in Boston, 05 was in Columbus. I was there because DU won both of them. But I think it was 08 or 08, 09 at the Pepsi Center. And I remember it was Boston College won it, beating Notre Dame with the guy named Ian Cole on the team. Remember that?
All I remember from that is that DU didn't make it, and it was super bummed.
Right. But yeah, it was actually a good Frozen Four. It was Michigan, Notre Dame, BC, and North Dakota, four star-studded programs, and BC and Nathan Gerby won that thing, and it was a really good Frozen Four, even though DU wasn't here.
It was 2008, by the way. You were right, Mike Chambers.
Hey, he was there. Don't question the man. Mike, with that, you just mentioned kind of the all-star programs. I want to get into Minnesota State a little bit. Not exactly a team we've heard a lot about, but I'm hearing a lot of the experts pick Minnesota State in tonight's game, saying that they're just a wagon, right? They're a powerhouse and a well-oiled machine backed by their Hobie Baker winner, goaltender Dryden McKay. So I guess, what do you know about Minnesota State, and is this goaltender going to be DU's biggest hurdle in tonight's game?
Did you? I don't know much about college like I did when I carved my soul in the early 2000s, but I just know that their goal and Minnesota State can play a lot of different ways. They can run and gun, or they can tighten up and play good defense. So I think that's kind of what DU can do too. So I think it should be a great game. I think the Pios, I'm not there. It made too much sense to send me from Pittsburgh to Boston and cover the Frozen Four, because I'm not in Canada here with the Avs, because we can't. The flights up there are on steroids in terms of the prices. So I've got this weekend off. I'm really looking forward to watching tonight's game. I think it's going to be awesome in Boston, and I think DU's got a great chance, because I think they're playing with a lot of confidence right now, and they've got immense talent. I've never seen such a good freshman class. I've seen a good freshman class equally as good on paper, but I've never seen one that actually comes out and is this dominant, this good as 18, 19-year-old kids.
Mike, what I think, and you'll have to back me up on this or tell me if I'm totally wrong, but if DU can come out with the same kind of fervor that they had in the start of that game against Michigan, that they're setting a good tone for the game and they're off to the right start. Like that game for me, they looked incredible. They didn't really get rewarded for a lot of the opportunities, but they were just really taking it to Michigan, really for the duration of the game. And I feel like that's probably the biggest key for them is to just try and get a couple goals early and play that run and gun style, like you said.
Absolutely, Ryan. I mean, if they come out like that again, and then they weather the storm like they did against Michigan there early in the second period, and then retook over the game there in the latter half of the set. Hey, let's face it, DU should have won that game 4-1 or something, right? I mean, it was close because Michigan really played well and got some bounces late, but DU outshot them, 2-1 almost. And I believe if they do that again, even against this goalie, DU's going to have a heck of a chance for that number 9 title, which is big because that's going to tie Michigan for number 1.
And we did see a big game from Carter Savoy. Not much from Bobby Brink. Like, what do you think it needs? Do you need a guy like Brink to get going and get on the score sheet, or are they okay with the way that they've been playing? You know, a little bit of offense, but pretty good defense too.
Well, Bob on the game-winning goal against Michigan, but he kind of just threw it at the net, which sometimes is a good thing. But Carter Savoy is a scorer. I mean, he's the guy. In fact, boys, on Thursday I met a bunch of guys who I play hockey with at the sports book in Centennial to watch the Pios game. And then when it goes into overtime, they get down who they think is going to win. And you can only pick a single guy. So if you pick a guy from pick a guy.
Oh, no.
We lost you, Mike. It was getting to the good part of the story. We heard pick a guy last.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Nope.
You got me?
Yep.
I picked Carter Savoy, and I won the thing anyhow. Long story short, $5.
Nice.
So, I mean, if you're going to pick anybody to win today, I would go with that guy.
All right, last question from me, Mike. I wanted to get into coaches, right? I think when George Gwozdecki was out the door, I think a lot of people maybe saw the demise of DU hockey, at least in terms of being a national powerhouse coming. And David Carr was able to keep this a national prominent program. I mean, what has he done to be able to keep this at such a good, elevated, I guess, situation?
Well, it went to Jim Montgomery, and he's the one that was responsible for getting this thing back on its feet, and then he hired David Carl. So I think 100% of that credit of carrying the torch after Gwozdecki goes to Jim Montgomery for sure.
Mm-hmm.
They won a national championship in 2017 even.
Oh, yeah. Monty's a great coach, a great man.
Great person. Yeah, I actually saw him out at a bar after they went to take the trophy to the Coors Field at a Rockies game, and he went to the bars afterwards, was flaunting that trophy around. Just a good guy and a great guy to just catch a beer with, right?
He's
a great
assistant in
coach.
St. Louis now too still, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I can catch a beer with him anymore, but
It's true.
He's a great man, and he's gone through some stuff in Dallas, but he's the best coach I've ever seen. He does more with a team than any coach I've ever seen, and he's a great man too, and he's a great family man, and I love that guy.
Mike, last one for me, and we'll let you go. Do you have a final score prediction?
I don't have a score, Ryan. I'm just going to say that I like the Pios. And I'm a fan here today, so I'm rooting for them. I'm not covering them. I'm pulling for them. I think that there's something special about DU and Boston, and I think that find a way to win. I think they're certainly good enough, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Thanks, Mike.
Indeed. Thanks, Mike, and enjoy the night as a fan for once.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, boys. Thank you.
All right, talk to you soon. There you have it. Mike Chambers of the Denver Post talking DU hockey. I'm excited for tonight. Here's my picture of me and Jim Montgomery with
It's
the trophy.
true, with the national championship
I
trophy.
don't know if you guys can see that there, those watching live, but thanks to Mike for hanging out with us and getting us amped up, more amped up than we already were.
When he talks about Boston, the last time that DU was in the final in Boston, 2004, they won the national championship. Matt Carl was playing. Dave Carl was 14 years old watching from home. Didn't get to go.
I know. I'm jealous. The guy's a year younger than I am. He's been coaching for how long now? 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, doing a good job of it. I love it. I got my crimson and gold on. I got the fight song lyrics pulled up on my phone. I'm ready.
Fun fact, the Dryden McKay. What?
McKay, yeah.
Dryden McKay.
I keep thinking Ken Dryden. It's throwing me off.
Well, you know, that has to be who he was named after, right? Hobie Baker winner. He's only the third goaltender to win it and the first since Ryan Miller in 2001. So I think we're looking at a stud tonight, and I do think he is going to be the biggest hurdle for DU.
But you got to give DU credit. They beat Michigan, and Michigan had 4 of last year's top 5 draft picks, let alone the number. They had 7 number 1 draft picks on their team. I believe they had 13 NHL draft picks on the roster. They were a team that was stacked.
Including Owen Power, who I think got signed today to the Buffalo Sabres. So we might see him yesterday. So we might see him in the NHL here soon. But yeah, we really flashed our knowledge of the NCAA right there, didn't we? We'll be right back to get to a mixed bag skate, a couple more items to get to around the NHL. And that's what we've been talking about, right? The DU Pioneers just don't get the coverage, and we just don't know enough about them as we should here in Denver. So everybody out there, get ready for tonight's game, 6 o'clock, Minnesota State. DU. We'll be right back.
Let's go Pios.
Get to the mixed bag skate. Let's go Pios.
I play hockey and I fornicate because those are the 2 most fun things in cold weather.
We're back. Final segment of the hockey show for this week as we're approaching the end of the regular season. I can't wait for playoff editions of the hockey show. They better not throw too many matinee Avalanche playoff games.
Every game's going to be on a Saturday. We're going to just have to move time slots.
We'll
just do it live.
That's the thing, though, about the Avalanche in the playoffs. They treat us like a West Coast team, and all the Avalanche games are at 8 o'clock or later, usually.
I feel like so many games this year have been at 8 o'clock already.
I know it. Give us some 6 p.m. starts, please, NHL, please. But we got a couple more things to get to here in the mixed bag skate, starting with Roman Yossi, first defenseman to get 20 goals and 60 assists since Raymond Bourque. You heard of him? My question to you, Roman Yossi, considering what he's done in the last month and a half, 2 months of this season, has he ran away with the Norris Trophy, or do you think Cale Makar is still in the mix?
I was just quizzed by none other than friend of the show, Greg Wyshynski, on this last week for his NHL Awards Watch column.
Which came out today, I think.
Yesterday or the day before? I don't know. Your days are...
I guess.
Just put them in a blender, I guess. But not only did I get an anonymous quote in the article, I still picked Makar over Yossi. I still picked Hedman over Yossi, as a matter of fact, because I think for me it's not just about points for the Norris. And although we've seen some missteps lately from Cale Makar, I still think he plays more in all situations. He plays better defense. He's not as sheltered as Yossi is. I think Makar has the overall game aspect. But you could throw a caveat out there that he does benefit greatly from playing with a great number 7, which is Devon Taves.
Sure, but we saw the game last night against Winnipeg, right? And who got the game-winning goal? Cale Makar. That was his 6th game-winning goal of the season. The only defenseman that's up there is Victor Hedman, also with 6. Other than that, it's all forwards for the top 50.
Yeah, I like game-breaking stats. I take that into account. I take, even strength stats into account, how they're playing 5-on-5. I think quality of competition is important, and minutes. Like if Yossi was playing like 10 minutes a game and he had these points, on the one hand, you'd be like, that's less opportunity to score, so that makes it wildly impressive. But on the other hand, like, he's not playing a lot against other teams' players, too. You know what I mean? He hasn't played with a partner like Devon Taves, but he also hasn't played, top line against top line as much. So I think it's amazingly impressive what he's done. The dude puts up like 3 assists a game. He's just on a tear.
Yeah, and I know we don't love plus minus as a very telling stat, but of course Devon Taves and Cale Makar both in the top 10 of plus minuses among all players, not just defensemen. And you don't really see Roman Yossi or Victor Hedman until 26 Roman Yossi and Victor Hedman further down the list. I can't even find him on the fly here. So I think in terms of offense and being clutch, Cale Makar certainly deserves a nod there. But when you look at the picture of the whole, I think it's going to be a much closer battle than we're ready for.
Just marvel at what is happening in the NHL right now. You know what? We should get Jay Beagle on the line and ask him what he thinks about Roman Yossi's season.
Yeah, as long as he's not smiling after each goal, I'm sure he might be okay with it, right?
Have you seen Roman Yossi? His eyes smile right into your heart.
That brings us to Austin Matthews getting 56 goals. I think the most alarming, or just what caught me the most off guard about this stat is that he is the highest scoring Toronto Maple Leaf player of all time. Considering the history in that team, the fact that he now, in present day 2022, when goals are supposed to be lower than ever, right, is burying 56 goals. Will he get to 60?
I think he makes it. I think he makes it probably by the end of next week.
Might even be his next game.
Yeah, I mean, he is on fire. He is my top choice for Hart right now. You could say you could give it to Cale Makar. I don't think he's as deserving. I think the Avs are too stacked. Is Toronto pretty stacked? Sure they are. But what Matthews has been doing is incredible.
I just love his vision for the game, right? He creates chances that are super creative because he knows exactly where everybody is at any given point, and he knows he has a small window of time to execute, and he does it so well. He finds that open ice, and he executes, and I just think he's the greatest scorer of this generation, more than any other guys that we're seeing around the league, including that number 8 guy in Washington.
He's on one. I also think Shesterkin deserves a nod there. I think Draisaitl and Gaudreau deserve nods there. I picked Draisaitl on my choices over Connor McDavid because I think he's doing a little bit more all around than Connor is. But, what Matthews is doing is just amazing.
Brendan Gallagher of the Montreal Canadiens calls out Tim Stützle of the Ottawa Senators on being a diver. We've heard that accusation a couple other times across the league of other players. What are your thoughts on another player calling another player a diver?
I mean, Stützle ended up missing games for an injury that he was called a diver on. So, I don't know. I think it's preposterous. I haven't seen the play in question, but, I mean, we've seen dives before. I mean, sometimes, though, the league will call embellishment on stuff like somebody gets tripped, and they call the trip and the embellishment. It's like, what did he do to get an embellishment when he was tripped? I don't know how that works.
I love players calling out other players. It's very WWE-esque to me, and I love it, right? I think earlier this year we saw the Kachucks going after Brendan Lemieux in L.A., right? You see it happening more and more across the league, and I'm here for it. I think it builds to the,
There are so many
enjoyment.
Friends in the league. Sometimes you just want a little hate to flow.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get it going.
And public hate, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to crush you, brother. Saturday, WrestleMania, you're mine.
I'll take you in the cage.
Lastly,
Get me to the
Avalanche.
Slim Jim.
Colorado Avalanche re-signed Curtis McDermott for 2 years, so we'll see him both next year and the following year.
But probably not in the playoffs.
I mean, depending on the situation, I think, right?
I don't know. It's been interesting to see how he's done, how the team thinks of him. Everybody says the right things publicly. I don't know. I've been more impressed. Like, of all the guys on the team that I've been impressed with that are enormous, it's Val Nichushkin.
Sure.
The dude is a tank, and he's playing exceptionally well. He's playing the best hockey of his life.
Sure. It sure seems like Curtis McDermott has some work to do on his skating, right? It looks like his ankles are a little bit floppy out there, but I'm sure he's a better NHL player than I will ever be, and, of course, just embraced by his team. Well-loved, and everybody does say good things about him publicly.
And it's awesome that he can play forward or defense like that. To have a utility player like that is almost invaluable.
Yeah.
And you get him cheap.
Does he do either of them at a high level?
He's got more NHL goals than me this year.
Sure does. Sure does. Last thing we got to get to here, I want to look at the East Coast matchups if the playoffs were to start today and just see how excited you will be. One matchup, Florida Panthers versus the Washington Capitals. Next matchup, Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Carolina Hurricanes. Then we've got Toronto and Boston, which is going to be a drama-filled, right? A classic. We've seen that matchup over and over and over. And then, of course, the Rangers and the Penguins. We saw how that game ended the other day with Igor Shesterkin waving the Pittsburgh Penguins off the ice, right? I think those 4 matchups are incredible, and we're in for a real treat first round East Coast playoffs.
Florida versus Washington right now, I think Florida takes it in probably 5 games. I don't know that Washington has the goaltending to stand up to it or the scoring prowess ultimately. It'd be crazy to see Ovechkin knocked out in the first round, but hey, he deserves it this year. Tampa versus Carolina, that is criminal. That series is criminal that one of those 2 teams will not come out of the first round of the playoffs in the East. My money's on Carolina right now. They've got it all going, except for Freddie Anderson, who's single-handedly trying to destroy my fantasy season by losing every game. Toronto versus Boston, classic. I think this is the year that Toronto takes it. I think they finally overcome the hump, except for what do they even have in net for goaltending? That's the ultimate question. You got the Swayman-Ullmark duo in Boston, and they've been pretty impressive. And then the Rangers versus Pittsburgh, I mean, it depends on which Penguins team shows up. If it's the team that got shut out against the Rangers the other night, then, that could be a quick series. But if it's the team that I think played the Avs fairly well in the first of the back-to-back games, that could be a tough one for them. But Shesterkin is just an animal in net.
I think the NHL world deserves the 4 number 1s to meet in the conference finals, right? So that would be Florida versus Carolina and the Avalanche versus Calgary. That would be the most ideal position. But that'll do it for this week's edition of The Hockey Show. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you're on YouTube, if you're on the podcast, if you're on Live FM Radio, if you're on Twitch, or if you're on Twitter, we love every single one of you. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll be back next week to break down more of the hockey world on Colorado's biggest and best live hockey radio show right here on Mile High Sports. Thanks again for hanging out with us. JJ Jerez, Ryan Bowling, Coach Bailey behind the glass. We'll see you later.